News, views, voices of the global Indian community. India abroad.
Well, I'm glad that the elections outcome, at least, maybe this will come out to be true, is predicting a more stable, strong central government. In any country, you want that. This is one of the big risks of democracy, that things could also fall apart from a democracy, especially when there's so much diversity, and diversity is combined with foreign intervention. Because the different fragments of India, the different constituents of India, used to be a very healthy diversity, supporting each other, working together, ups and downs, fights also, but sorted it out always internally. And now they become co-opted by foreign excesses. Every little minority has some foreign headquarters who are funding them, giving them guidance, telling them to blame each other, fight each other. All this wokeism has come in. So the risk is that democracy can then turn into a vote bank fragmentation and falling apart, And that tendency is there, that vociferous tendency is there in India. It will remain there, and one has to be vigilant. So whenever there's a chance to consolidate and counter that and have a central government which is powerful, bringing all these factions together is a good idea. So it seems that that is happening. And so India will have another 5 years of stability and maybe have enough clout and enough power to make some constitutional changes, which are necessary, because this constitution was not the best in many ways, And it requires courageous action, risk-taking. And people will only take risks when they have the capacity to take risks and when they're confident and they get a mandate. So all of these are good things happening in India. Regardless of how critical some of the press are, because they're jealous and they're not supporting a united making India, they're supporting a breaking India, so they're jealous. And the irony is that there are political parties in India who are aligned with some of these breaking India forces. I've been writing about it for 30 years, mentioning names of people. In the book Snakes in the Ganga, we mentioned Rahul Gandhi, we mentioned his name, how Harvard has championed this, and how Wall Street Journal and how various think tanks, they champion this kind of a breaking India. So all this is good, that India can courageously counter all this. And the reason India can counter all this is because I think the Modi government, despite all the things that people claim, argue and criticize, the fact is that they've delivered development. They've delivered development. A lot more development is needed, but they've delivered it, and you can show statistically that every segment of society has benefited, poor people have benefited, minorities have benefited, and so on. And when you can show it numerically, that now they have roads and they have clean water and they have better health facilities and all of that, food and whatever, education. So then people have to say, okay, this government has delivered, whereas previous government is making all the slogans to fight poverty, etc., not delivering. Ultimately, poor people need economic development, and I think that has been a successful central agenda of this government. So that's all good stuff. First of all, let me just say that while I really like Jaishankar's ability and his audacity and his quick response, that's all good. Previously, they were apologetic. Right. But I will say I have a criticism that he's not able to anticipate. He's able to react. He's not able to anticipate where it's coming from, where the vulnerabilities are, where the next attack is coming, who are the bad guys, who are the ones doing it. Because they haven't done a diagnostic, they haven't done deep enough research. And this is what I'm developing research all the time, publishing, but I'm not sure they're taking it seriously. I'm not sure they're reading it enough. So because of that, they're like running around wondering where the next attack will come. And you cannot survive long term when the other side is deciding when and how and where to attack you, and then you will respond. So I think in the physical area of physical attacks, terrorist attacks, India has become pretty good. The intelligence agencies are able to stop the attacks or anticipate the attacks and respond before they happen in many cases. And there are many instances where they've been able to preempt attacks. But in the intellectual space of narratives, of tarnishing India's image, of stirring up violence against India, whether it's Khalistan, whether it's Kashmir separatists, whether it's all these woke kids who are shouting and screaming, whether it's the United Nations or whether it's the campuses and think tanks. India has not been able to, I'm sorry to say, but the Indian Council of Cultural Relations, ICCR, which reports to Jaishankar, has not been able to come up with annual reports, annual conferences, a database of who's who doing all this. They've not been able to do that. And so for such a large country with so much brains, I've always had this complaint, and I've always raised this issue whenever I meet any of them, and yet they don't seem to do anything. They keep thinking, they keep using terms like think tank and all that, but there's no thinking happening in these so-called think tanks. So that is why, despite Jaishankar's responsiveness, very good eloquence and courage, it's not enough, because India is not thinking out and saying, okay, where are the risks in the next 6 months, next 2 years, next 5 years, next 10 years? And what are the forces behind it? Why are they doing it? How do we neutralize them? How do we counter them? Because, if you understand, that is the Purva Paksha tradition. If you understand the other side, you can sometimes buy a few of them back. Sometimes you can counter with the you can create internal friction in their own camp, like they do within India. They create internal friction among Indians. We can do that among them also. You can anticipate what they're up to next and have a response ready for them. This type of thinking we are not doing, and that's my disappointment.
And who are the forces behind this?
Well, I have written about these quite a lot. I mean, the first wave of Breaking India, which I wrote I started writing 25 years ago, and then about 15 years ago, a bestseller book called Breaking India. There we talked about what we call Breaking India 1.0, which is the poor people were the Breaking India forces. And so the foreign forces were either evangelists trying to convert them, or Maoists and Marxists trying to basically rabble-rouse poor people. So it was the Breaking India was from below the lower level people, so to speak, in the social economic strata. And the outside forces were those who wanted to use them, exploit them, and create their own vote bank, and get their own footprint in India. That was the first Breaking India force. And we did a huge impact. Our foundation was responsible for championing a change in FCRA laws. And a lot of these foreign funded NGOs got clamped down, shut down, because we lobbied for it. We had so many conferences in Delhi, in India International Center. With Madhu Kishwar, I did conferences. I did so many talks on my own, exposing names of organizations. If you read the BI 1.0 book, the Breaking India book, there must be 100 names there. And so many of them were shut down or pushed back. So we had an impact. Then we realized that the problem is even worse. Now in Breaking India 2.0, which I exposed in my Snakes in the Ganga book, the problem is not poor people we are going after, but the problem is that the elites who come from good families, their parents are businessmen and industrialists, they go to Harvard and Ivy Leagues, they come from government officials, children and nephews, nieces. So the people who are the rulers of either the political class, administrative class, military class, their kids, or people who are the rulers of industry, their kids, they are now being taken over by the ultra left. Okay, and so you wonder, why would Mahindra, as an example, fund this kind of a thing with his own name? And he's funding it while in India he's a patriotic guy and whatnot. Is he funding it out of ignorance? But then he should stop funding, because I pointed it out. Right. And Mahindra would never invest in a factory, put tens of millions of dollars without due diligence. He would never do that. No Indian industrialist would invest their money in some kind of a business without due diligence. So why would they invest their money setting up a think tank in their name without due diligence? And the due diligence is so obvious. The people that are running these think tanks in their name, they are so negative, anti-India, extreme, anti-Hinduism and so on. It's not even a lot of work to do that. You just go to their annual events, you go to their what all scholarship they have done, funded, and you'll find it there. So it means complete carelessness on the part of the Indian industrialists who funded all this. And one of the worst anti-India, anti-Hindu scholars in the world is a Professor Hansen. Professor Hansen at Stanford. Do you know his title? Okay. He's called Reliance Dhirubhai Ambani Professor at Stanford.
And he's the most...
He's the most anti-India, and he's there right now. And all this dismantle Hindutva and all that, he's one of the signatories to all these things. You read his papers, it's so loud, clear. He considers that this whole Hindu revival and the Hindu Rashtra idea and the RSS and the Modi, they're violating human rights of minorities, they should have sanctions against them, they are a bunch of Nazis. I mean, it is not like you have to be very subtle reading it. It is so blatant out there. These people go and give at hearings, they go and they talk to the US Commission on Religious Freedom, they talk to the US Senate and Congress, and they are the ones who are being supported by all the enemies of India, whether it's ISI, whether it's Kashmir separatists, whether it's Khalistanis. They like to quote this kind of a thing. And it is surprising that Ambani got his name on it. Ambani. Reliance and Ambani, both names are there on his title. And so why, well, you have to ask him, you have to put him in the camera like me, and ask him, this is what Rajiv Malhotra is saying, and play this clip to him and say, this is what Rajiv Malhotra is saying. Why don't you sit down with Rajiv and talk to him about it? Why haven't your people read the book and the chapters on it? Why haven't you read the articles and books of Professor Hanson? Why don't you either cancel him or call him up and say, and hold him responsible and say, why are you writing all this? And if you have a right to freedom, we're not denying that. Everybody should have a right to intellectual freedom. I never stop that. But also give the opponent a chance. So if he has written 10 books and 50 articles, why wouldn't Ambani take our side of it, which is the opposite side, and say, okay, now I'm going to put some resources and support that also. Why wouldn't he support both sides if he wants to be really fair-minded? Okay, let's say he doesn't want to be pro-India. He wants to be fair-minded because he wants the world to think that he's a liberal intellectual, and he wants to have Warren Buffett on his board, and he wants to have Bill Gates supporting him, and he wants to have Mark Zuckerberg, all these people to come and invest in his companies, and he wants to come across like he's not some kind of a narrow-minded nationalist. Maybe it's image building like that. Maybe being globalist is more important for him. Fine. But then in the name of being a liberal globalist, he could say, I'm bringing both sides. Okay, I've been supporting this. Now I'm going to support the people who oppose him, and let them come and I will moderate. He should be doing that. But there is no opportunity for a voice like mine to be heard and to be given a chance. So this is really distressing, and this is what we're calling Breaking India 2.0. Now we're writing a book which is ready in the next 3-4 months. It should be out, and it's called Breaking India 3.0, and I'm not disclosing it right now, but it goes and tells you and explains the problem is even deeper. Even deeper, there's one grassroots level problem in Breaking India 1.0 from the bottom of the pyramid. Then Breaking India 2.0 talks about the top of the pyramid of the rich people, the elite people, funded by the rich, and those universities are putting poison in the minds of our own rich people. These guys going back and running the country in various ways, and their minds are being poisoned. So how can you have Vishwa Guru and all those things, slogans, when our own people are using our own resources and with our own brand name on it to ruin us through this kind of an education? So Breaking India 3.0, which will come out, drills even deeper and tells you about things which I'm not sure we can solve those problems at this stage, because this is like a cancer which has spread very far. And there are some surprising people and organizations that are being implicated in this next 3.0. If the same thing continues, I don't think there will be an India 2047, because I feel that the combination of hard power attack by China, and they will use Pakistan as a useful idiot just to do the dirty work. I don't think China itself will come in with marching, troops and all that. They may send drones and, robotic soldiers and all those things and keep, challenging India and bring India's military under challenge. But they can use Pakistan as a useful people for troops on the ground. Pakistan is more than happy to do that. That combination, and India should not think that because we are part of the Quad and they'll save us. Quad is only navy. Quad is only water, sea, ocean. It is not land where the threat is really coming from. So the Quad is not going to put American troops on the ground in India. There's no way that it will happen. And so I don't think that relying on just USA is going to be enough to save India. And India's technology is way behind. India's military technology, in my book on artificial intelligence, I point out. Quantum computing, artificial intelligence, material science, all of that stuff, India is behind. 10 years at least, in these areas. And it is not easy to catch up. So the whole AI story, what India failed to do, refused to do, is a separate topic we can get into, but I'm very concerned about that. So that's the hard power problem that India faces vis-a-vis particularly China. But then there is, we keep talking soft power. Let me discuss soft power. We say yoga is soft power. Okay, so if yoga is soft power, power means that we should be able to influence those people through that soft power, right? Yeah. So if a majority of the people in the US Congress and Senate, either they practice yoga or their wife practices yoga or they have a kid who practices yoga, why can't we get them to vote for us? If we can't use yoga to win votes, then it is not soft power. It is good culture. There's a difference between culture. You know, you are exporting culture, people enjoy it. But that culture turns into power only when people who are influenced by that culture, whether it is food, whether it is lifestyle, whatever it is, if they are influenced by that culture so much that they start taking political positions, you know, they are your vote bank in the US Congress. If that were the case, okay, then I would say, yeah, yoga is soft power, because 200 congressmen are part of the yoga alliance in Congress, and they are for India because they are yogis. There is no such thing. It's all, you know, kind of fantasy in our minds. So yoga is not power at all. It's just culture. It's beautiful, good culture, but you cannot delude yourself into thinking that we got soft power. You see what I'm saying? Now, Pakistan has soft power through the whole Islam alliance, because they position themselves as, okay, we are the Islamic nuclear power and whatnot, and with the help of Middle East funding, or, you know, they are the people who are populating a lot of these Islamic forces that are anti-India and anti-Hindu. They have a role in that. They've also co-opted the Khalistanis. A lot of these Khalistani rallies and events, the ISI funded people are into it, behind it. So you see, the problems of India are complex and they need a proper diagnosis. The diagnosis needs full-time scholars, full-time, not influencer who goes once in a while and makes a speech and goes to some manthan and talks nicely. You need people who are really good at scholarship and who are very neutral and not have to praise and support anybody, but just speak for themselves. You need such people, and India has not cultivated such think tanks. All these billionaires should be creating genuine, honest think tanks in India. That's what they should be doing, rather than funding somewhere else. And the government should have think tanks, the media should have think tanks, academic people should have think tanks. They don't. So you have to belong to this camp or that camp. Right. And then you're quickly identified as, okay, you must be a BJP guy. You know, I speak this way as an independent free thinker. But my critics quickly want to say, okay, you must be some RSS man or some BJP man, you know. Yeah, they will tell you to go to Pakistan. So, you know, you need that free space, that public intellectual space in India. And I'm very glad that you are championing that and asking these kind of questions, because clearly not enough of this comes out. I think the whole idea of minorities should be thrown out. There should be individual. The quota system should be anyone below a certain level of income. Doesn't matter what his background is. A poor person is a poor person. And a poor Brahmin is also a poor person. And a rich Muslim or a rich Dalit is a rich person. So I think this business that, it's a wrong idea to encourage collective groups, because when you create an identity and say this whole identity, this collection of people deserves better, then what you're doing is you're bringing in irresponsible politicians who will come and fan the flames of identity politics and create divisiveness. So something that levels the playing field. So the Hindu, all this right to education, which I'm discussing in my next book, the right to education is biased because it is biased only against Hindus. It's not applicable to minorities, you see. So that's bad idea. All of these Hindu temples, the houses of worship should be treated equally. If you want government involved, it should be involved in gurdwaras and churches and mosques and all that. If you don't want government involved in the minority religious organizations, then they should also get out of the Hindu ones. So there are so many areas where the bias, anti-majority bias is very strong. That should be removed. So when they're trying to do universal UCC, Universal Civil Code, they should also say, part of that should be, it should not be just personal law, family law that is being changed, but also public policy towards faiths should be equal. It should, Article 1 of this should say, no law that is biased for a particular religion or community or against a particular religion or community shall be valid from now on. all such laws can be challenged and defeated and finished off. The special privileges given should be on individuals who deserve it and on individual basis, right? So maybe in India with the Aadhaar system and so on, they can have a database of you have to apply and show that you are a deserving person. Like here in this country, when a kid goes to college and he wants to apply for financial aid, there are questions which have nothing to do with your religion. You know, you ask whether, you know, you come from family of this kind, background, income, whatever, you know, you have handicap, you know, okay, there's a special thing for that. So India could have with AI, you can do these things very efficiently. You can build a database of and then give everybody a rating and say, okay, you are rated at this level of privilege that you need to help you. Yeah? Point-based system. And then maybe your kids are different because, hey, you are successful, we are very happy, but now your kids don't need it because they'll be fine. And so so if you were to do it that way, it will be more fair. I think it'll be more just. And that's more robust, and it will dismantle the divisive politics of India. It will dismantle many parties because they'll have no way. If you want to support poor people, then you will not be able to limit it to this group or that jati or this caste or that religion. You will not. You will have to support all the poor people, and that's how it should be. So I think there are some fundamental rethinking that India needs to do. So I think first of all, the think tanks should be people who are already proven, because whenever there's a gathering of so-called thinkers, 90% of them have never published anything. I mean, they're just wanting and talking, or they publish, out of the remaining 10%, 9 out of 10 have just recycled the same information somebody else has done. They're plagiarizing, copying and recycling information, and they haven't done anything original. So there ought to be real solid merit. To create such a think tank, the people at the very top have to be all people who are already accomplished. They have to be people who already done serious thinking, produce some results, produce some impact, and they should then sit down and come up with the blueprint and the design and how to create this think tank. It should not be some RSS guy, some BJP guy, some political guy, some retired army guy. It should not be the people with influence, because they don't have a track record necessarily as thinkers and intellectuals. So only people who meet a certain high standard of being productive intellectuals already, of some senior capacity, should be brought together and said, okay, now you create the blueprint for a think tank, and then it should be funded like that. I have, we have 20 people in India called under this Infinity Foundation India. They are young people, and I'm mentoring them. I'm mentoring them because I want that after I'm gone, this work should continue. So in our think tank, I'm teaching them how to be writers and researchers, and I want to encourage them by letting them come as co-authors. So first they are mentored, they help out and all that, they got given small assignments. Then they start writing articles, we put them together in a book. So we have one book on AI was written with 10 people of none of my articles, but 10 people. And then another book where we talked about the 10 heads of Ravan. We took 10 anti-Indian nasty people, and each was written by one of my trained people. So now we're going to do another book by our team, young team. So that's one level, and then at another level I co-author, I bring them in and say, okay, you can be my co-author. So I'm doing my best not only to be a productive intellectual for myself in my own right, but also mentor other people and teach them how to do it. But I'm just one guy, and if we had more resources, instead of 20, I would be training 200 people and create a whole parampara, a whole lineage of people who can think at a certain level. I don't know anyone else in India who can say that he quit everything and for 30 years this is all he's done. Number two, that he's produced a lot on his own. And number three, he's training 20, 30 people to replace him. I mean, I don't know people like that. There are people who have done a lot of original thinking in their own name, but they haven't trained anyone else. I mean, when they're gone, it's gone. So such an institution has to be multi-generational. You have to think beyond your own self. And it cannot be that, when the famous author is gone, then this whole thing is disappeared. You have to have left a legacy of others that you train. So that's needed. People who can think beyond themselves and who can think beyond the immediate and think long term. I think he has been very busy in the development front. That's one thing, and that's good, he's been. But he could have delegated with the right kind of people. And every time I wanted to encourage that they do a think tank, you know, RSS, it would be given to RSS and RSS would give it to one of their old timers. But those people are not raised in an international capacity. They don't know the whole world discourse. They have not, their pracharaks are different. That's a different grassroots. RSS is one of the most important organizations in India. And I have a lot of friends there and I love the top leaders. I support them. I think they are good people. But that is not what they are ready for. They are not, then they cannot produce a think tank from within. So this idea that we have to only use our own people has failed. You know, sometimes you have to say right at the top of our think tank will be outsiders. And they have not yet been able to do that. They always, if I were to go there and say, okay, help me with the think tank, they'll say you work with this fellow. Okay, now who want to work with somebody like that? And then you are back into their politics and not. So you have to be able to bring in outside. You know, there was a time in the corporate world in America when they were not doing, big companies were not doing venture capital. So I was one of the first that where a venture was funded by AT&T. They did not even have a legal way to fund a venture, but they had to figure out some tricks. But now all the big corporates realize that we have to fund people who are outside our corporate culture. Right, a large amount of money of Google and Facebook and you know Microsoft and Apple, all these guys, they have a venture group where they go and get new people outside their corporate culture to come with all these ideas because they know that that's good for them. RSS needs to do that. RSS needs to go and say we're going to have 5 major initiatives launched by non-RSS people. They need to do that. It will make them stronger. They should not be feeling weak that, oh, you know, these new people, we don't know who they are. They should have the courage and strength that, listen, we can trust certain people and we're going to back these people. And they will not be RSS people, they'll be independent. That's how you can start think tanks. I am a pro RSS. I'm very pro RSS. Listen, if there were no RSS, we would be in serious trouble. I'll tell you that. And I also said the RSS leaders are very good. I know them well and they are extremely good. But you know, there is a rank and file, there's a huge organization. And what I'm saying is that whenever there's a very large organization which has been there for a long time, it is inbred. It is inbred, which means it's very good at what it has been doing. Very good. And that means at the grassroots holding the nation together, holding the idea of Rashtriyata together is their calling card. That's their signature. And they're very good at that. But now I'm talking about something different. Now I'm talking about this international think tank is not a product of, you know, from villages thinking. That is one kind of thinking also needed. But this globalization, geopolitical and inter-civilizational think tank has to come from people who have experience living somewhere else. I lived here 55 years in this country and I studied this country. Now I'm sure if somebody lived in China for a long time, but he's a Bharatiya vision, Bharatiya drishti, he would be the right person for a think tank on China. You follow? If there's somebody who lived in Russia or lived in France or wherever, they would be very important to have a think tank with those civilizations. So I have certain qualities vis-a-vis the US because I lived here so long. And yet I go to India 3 or 4 times. Now the typical RSS man who may have lived here a few years, but he's got a job and he's doing this part-time, but he's mainly rooted in India, may not be that qualified. It is not about RSS as an institution, but I think the level of people they need, they don't have for a really world-class think tank. So it's not a criticism of RSS. It's like basically like I would go to a corporate client. I consulted for British Telecom, I consulted for AT&T, a lot of these people, help them get out of their cocoon, their bubble, by saying that, in fact, my advice to British Telecom, which they took by the way, was that 50% of the executives you hire to run your new ventures should be outsiders. And they started doing that. Hired not just from within, you know, RSS is just promoting from within. Yeah, typical big organization, big corporate structure also, they promote from within because you want to encourage your people. Right. But certain type of initiatives and startups are outside the normal boundary. Right. And promoting from within, a guy who's been sitting there for decades of his life and learned how the system works, he's not going to, at this stage in his life, reinvent himself and do something different with innovation, right, and courage. You need outsiders. So my issue with them is they have not brought in outsiders to start new things, and I think that's a blind spot they have. And I say it as a friend. I say it as this is constructive criticism from my side. Absolutely true. I mean, certainly the Congress, certainly the Mamata Banerjee type people, Certainly these Dravidian parties, they are supported by this whole Tamil stuff in the US, and they've got Tamil chairs in Harvard and Berkeley and whatnot. So this idea that you can compromise India through ethnic divides of language or religious divide or financial status, through Dalits and whatnot, that has been going on for a while. That's definitely true. So the Indian opposition we need a strong, patriotic, national, India first opposition party. We need that. That's not easy to find, because the opposition is weak and they need money and they need patronage. So the easy thing is to respond to somebody overseas, and maybe he'll be your big brother, and you listen, you carry out his agenda, and you become like a sepoy, which is very bad, very dangerous. So this is the weakness we have. In other democracies, like Britain, the Conservatives and the Labour Party, neither of them is foreign funded. They're not. You look at France. I mean, they are all French. They are all French people, but they believe in this wing or this side or that side. India needs parties that are healthy democracy, but India first. Well, the money doesn't have to be smuggled actual dollars, but it can also be in the form of youth training. It can be in the form of ideology. It can be in the form of, your nephew goes to this university and we pay for him and things like that. That goes on. That goes on. In fact, a friend of mine at Yale, he looked at who all were, this is like 10 years ago, who all were being given financial assistance to come from various countries. And one of their standard approaches was they look at children of senior people, because it's an investment in the future. Yeah, if you think about it, it's clever. I mean, they look at so and so's dad is working here, so and so's mother is working there, or their uncle or whatever, they are connected, and so they bring in these people and give them fellowship. So they invest in buying out the brains of the young generation. And so that there are many ways to gain influence which are not just sending money. Oh, influence, Congress party is from Harvard.
Which are the forces?
I would say Harvard is a very strong proponent of the Congress party. I would say that the liberal left newspapers in this country, the Wall Street Journal, Washington Post, New York Times, and many other, NPR, they're for them this Hindu nationalist and Hindu chauvinist and this and that is a very standard thing to talk about, and the opposing voice is not invited. Even somebody very mainstream and mild and moderate sounding like Fareed Zakaria, if you really study his things over many, many years, he will support Modi for some development, something. Yeah, but like he had this Raghu Ram Raj was his guest last weekend. And the whole thing was, so are you concerned about India's future and India's ability to handle minorities and human rights? And he asked very gentle questions. He wants to say something, but he'll let the guests say it. So that guy is going all out and saying, okay, they have this and that development advancement they've made in GDP and all, but I'm very concerned about these other human rights. But this guy, he's a sort of a B-grade economist. He doesn't know anything about human rights. So, but at the same time, Fareed Zakaria would not allow an opponent to come there and debate with him. So these are all the games and gimmicks that the foreign influencers are doing. Because the thing is that when you understand democracy, like India is a complex democracy with many voices,
right.
So is America. So in America, the Democratic Party certainly has a strong foothold from the people who are pro-Islam and pro-Marxist. There's no doubt about it. That's the woke element, and they're no longer just fringe people. They have a lot of voice in the Democratic Party. So whether Biden himself believes in this or that doesn't matter. But if you look at Biden's own statements over 40 years as a senator, he didn't believe in all this stuff. He was fairly straightforward, reasonable, middle-of-the-road person.
Right.
But he has to have his own survival. I mean, after all, they're backing him to be the president for the second term. They're backing him. So he has to give in on a lot of their agenda. And that's how democracy works. Whereas if it were a dictatorship, he would say, to hell with you, this is what I want. But in democracy, you can be kicked out. So he has to compromise. So the real question is, how did the Middle East funding and George Soros funding, and all these various kinds of people, Bill Gates funding, how did they get into American politics? That's the real story, because they are the people with the agenda. But then you should also ask, India is very, alert on George Soros, but not on Bill Gates, because we think he's like a saint. But Bill Gates is into population control. He's into, in the next book, we're going to talk about Bill Gates. And not him per se, but a whole lot of people. He is one of them named, but there are many others also. So this whole international cabal, which includes the UN, World Economic Forum, they're all part of this globalist movement. And India is a kind of a very complicated, but a very complicated country they can't really control, and they like to control. And at the same time, it's very tempting because it's very loose and you can get in many different ways. So India is a very attractive place for mischief makers. I would certainly amend the constitution once and for all to get rid of any minorityism. I would do that. And I would take this whole business of caste quotas and to make it into personal meritocracy oriented. That I would definitely do. I would create I would invest in some quality think tanks plural, not just one, but think tanks, and really turn the ICCR into a think tank and bring in people who are real solid thinkers, people who have got a huge record as a public intellectual, both international, domestic, in different areas. I would do that. I would revamp the whole education system. And my next book, I'll give you a little hint. It focuses on how the education system is ruining the next generation. But how, in what way it's ruining, I will tell you. Including a critique, in the book, including a very serious critique of the NEP 2020. Because it looks nice on the surface, but the liberal arts education which they are bringing in is tearing up the IITs, because they are now becoming like JNU. Okay, they're not teaching STEM, how to be a good engineer, which is what India needs, but teaching how to be this human rights, business, this and that. And so that's the gateway into which this liberal arts is the gateway through which the ultra left is coming in. All those professors who are teaching liberal arts and humanities in IITs, they're all trained in these kind of places. So what you are doing is you bring in people to give them STEM education and compete against China in all the technologies, but what these people are getting is a different kind of feeling towards their own country. So I would bring in people who are critical of this, and to really repair the entire education system. Now things are going into K through 12 also, which are very serious, which we're going to talk about. So these are some of the things I would do. So, this is very interesting. Media is now owned by industrialists. They're industrialists, they own everybody, Reliance and whatever. So the media is no longer autonomous, because if you are a part of a business house, when I'm interviewed by the Reliance people, they'll say, okay, beforehand we'll tell you we're not going to go easy, and so this Dhirubhai Ambani chair, we're not going to talk about that. That's how they have to tell me. So, but the truly independent voice is not there. You tell me now, who is a truly independent voice in India? I'm talking about non-government and non-business house, not there. And that depth we need. But I will go even further. I will say social media is foreign controlled. That is a very big topic of my concern. And my book, Artificial Intelligence and the Future of Power, goes into great detail on how mind control happens, political control happens, and how these algorithms are based from foreign countries. Even if you put the server in India, that doesn't mean anything, because the server in India is running the American algorithm. And whether it's physically there doesn't matter. It could be sitting in your house also, but whatever data it's collecting is going, and it's being what is coming back is the algorithm on how to manage you and how to manipulate you. So physical location doesn't solve the problem, right? So I think this whole AI field, data sciences field, this protection, surveillance, all of that bias, AI bias, I'm very deeply involved in those issues. And the future of social media, that is an area, when you're talking about media as the fourth estate, I would say the fourth pillar, this aspect of media is extremely dangerous in India. Blocking TikTok was a good thing, because Americans need to do that but haven't had the courage to do it. India did it. I'm saying kudos to Modi that they got this done. But don't think that the Americans don't have 10 times worse kind of TikToks. Don't think that geo partnership with Facebook is a good idea or with Google, because those guys getting further in. They're getting further into your home and planting their platform, their their tools. So India is really building its architecture, technology architecture, on top of American platforms. That's dangerous.